Okay, we're recording. Matthew, you want to take us away?
I will. Good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, wherever you might be on planet Earth today. My name is Matthew Hegum. I am one of the co-founders of the Accounting Alchemy Network. I'm joined today, as you may know, by Ingrid Edstrom, my co-founder, and our special guest today, Masami Soto, the founder of B1G1. This is our first official webinar for the Accounting Alchemy Network. As many of you know, we've been doing Lyceums covering everything from climate justice to what the world can look like in a post-growth ecosystem. And so today we're super excited to have Masami with us to really look at this question of how can we take action by doing what we're already doing. I'm excited about this. And I know that for us as a community on this path towards building a movement to help accountants transform the world, I think this is going to be a really critical conversation. There is a Q&A portion, but before we get into all of that, I'm going to pass it over to you, Ingrid, to get us set up for our webinar.
Yeah, so Masami, we're really excited to have you today. And we do have a handful of questions that we've already crowdsourced from our audience. But before we do that, we've got people chatting on the chat already. Alina says, hooray, welcome, Masami. Thank you so much for joining us. Those of you who are able to join us live on our Zoom today. It is currently 11 p.m. in Singapore, where Masami is, and it's 8 a.m. on the West Coast United States, where Matthew and I are. So it's a little bit of an adventure finding a time that works well between our two time zones. But I think without further ado, Masami, we want to learn all about your background and history and about B1G1 and the work that you are doing in the world. So I understand that you've got some slides for us. We would love it if you would go ahead and just dive into introducing yourself and B1G1, and then we'll get to our questions for you in a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And what you just mentioned during the intro about how can we actually take actions, and when we think about actions in this world, and nowadays we see so many big issues, and it's really overwhelming to think about what we can do. So today, what I would love to highlight is how do we actually take actions that actually matters and make a difference, but then doing so through the power of this thing called the small. Because we tend to worry about taking big actions, right? Because big actions seem to matter more, but what if small things mattered even more? So that's the topic I want to kind of cover as we go through this part together. And when we think about the power of small, I would like to talk about the power of stories, because we are all here because of our stories, your story, and your story took you here today to be here and tuning into a message like this. So I'm looking forward to exploring that story together in the next half an hour or so. And as we begin that story, maybe, first thing that's important to really reflect on our journey and in our story is to really think about the real purpose behind why we do what we do. And often when we start something, whether starting a business or going in a practice, studying something new, often we think it's about the destination that we get to. That's the purpose of real story. Real story or real journey. But the thing is, actually, what we experience during the experience and the story and the journey can be more powerful than where we eventually end up with. So I'd like to have these moments, share these moments together in this journey of next half an hour to really think about those times when we shift our perspective and how, like, by shifting perspective, we discover something much more meaningful and impactful. So that's what we are going to do. And we are here standing in this world. The world we belong is such a fascinating, beautiful place. And this is one picture of our world. And it's, of course, so amazingly beautiful. And in this grand, big world, we feel like this tiny little dot So that's us, the power of small, tiny us. And individually, we always feel small, and our small day-to-day actions don't seem to matter so much. How can we actually act on those big overwhelming problems, even if we care? We care about social issues, we care about environmental issues, but if we think about those big things, then we feel powerless. So we are going to focus on that tiny little dot. And being a tiny little dot is my expertise, one of my expertise, because that's me in front of, sitting in front of my grandparents' store in Tokyo. And so that's where I spend a lot of time in my childhood. Today I'm based in Singapore, but Japan was my original home country. So being a very shy little quiet child, for me, the world was always overwhelming at that time, and especially things that were seemingly outside and different. So as I grew up, I was probably the quietest child, in the class, and I didn't know how to connect with other kids, how to express myself. But there's one thing that I had, which was curiosity. So for me, growing up, being in family business and spending my, all our school holidays with my grandparents and helping them run this tiny little shop was important part of my journey, beginning of my journey, where I became very interested in businesses and how things worked in the world, and I enjoyed, helping run this business. But anyway, when I grew up, I had the opportunity to travel around the world because, as I said, one thing I had was curiosity, even though I was shy and I was quite often like overwhelmed and scared and felt like a little tiny dot, but I wanted to explore the world. So I left Japan and spent a few years traveling and backpacking around the world. And during that time, I discovered some of the most amazing things about this place we all belong, because even though we all looked different, we spoke different languages, came from different background, had different religions and so on, I realized that actually, we were all very similar in some way, because everywhere I went, I was so amazed by the kindness that I experienced from people. And when I couldn't speak the language in those countries, I started to really connect, because I let go of the expectation of trying to say the right thing, connecting in the right way, because I couldn't. So through that letting go and being totally vulnerable and being able to ask for help or receive the help or receive the kindness, I started to really connect and experience this like amazing humanity everywhere I went. And then I thought, like I used to think we are so different, but actually at the fundamental level, we were very similar, because people everywhere around the world actually wanted to have the same thing, which was happiness, joy, good life for their loved ones. And we were all working hard trying to create that for ourselves and for our loved ones. So I started to see this amazing sense of connection and also experienced amazing humanity during this time. And another thing I saw during that time were those big problems. I didn't know why they existed. So for example, I couldn't really understand why, there are still children who couldn't go to school and to complete basic education, or there are people who are fending for themselves when they have a physical disability, or there seems to be a lot of environmental pollution, even though we knew those things didn't serve us. So so I questioned a lot out of curiosity, and I started to think that actually the world wasn't going to the right direction. And even today, when we look at these big problems, then we feel overwhelmed that it's still like hundreds of millions of people still don't have access to basic resources like clean water, sanitation. Hundreds of millions of children, 264 million children, still don't have access to education, or nearly 1 billion people still don't have access to proper electricity, or billions and billions of trees are being cut down each year, whilst we know that our global ecosystem are critical for us. So one day when I got back in Japan, and then looking around the busy street where people are walking past, everybody seems to be shopping and trying to have more for their own life. And then one day I thought, like, well, something doesn't make sense. Like, why do we need to have more when we have it already quite enough? And so because I was being this very simplistic person, I wanted to make sense of this. And then one day I thought, like, I don't want to be here and to create more problems for the world. So I tried to find a way to create self-sufficiency and not to buy things and not to buy into consumerism. So that's what I did. Like, I was a little bit judgmental about the world and businesses. And so I went to countryside and then spend the next 2 years living with farmers, trying to find this secret to self-sufficiency. So I did, and I learned to grow food, and I learned to make everything and live in an exchange kind of economy. And I enjoyed that time so much. But after, at the end of 2 years, I actually realized that I was probably wrong to judge the world, because actually, when I thought about all the amazing people I connected with, everybody wanted to have good things and didn't want to cause harm. They were just living their life and trying to care for their loved ones and themselves. So I started to reflect on that, and I realized that we don't exist to be isolate, to be in isolation. We exist to connect, and businesses were actually here to benefit our lives and to make things better and more convenient, comfortable, enjoyable. And being in the countryside, I still enjoyed sharing things with others that I cared about. And that was, very important to be not, being judgmental, and to be more open and to appreciate. So anyway, there was one thing I learned during that time. So there was in nature this cycle of creation. Then farmers actually harness this power of creation to create lasting abundance. So first of all, actually, when you want to have abundance, then you first nourish the soil, take care of the environment, and that's really the secret of how to create long-term abundance. And it's very, very simple lesson. Like, you have to nourish the soil, and then after that, you grow, the things you want to have more of. Then you will have a harvest. And it's just a simple thing. There is a seasons, and there is an ecosystem around us, and we need to appreciate and cultivate these things. And so when we are not giving to the soil and continuously creating the environment for abundance, then of course this abundance wouldn't sustain itself long term. Simple truth. So I thought that maybe in our world, we started to forget about this simple truth because we became very sophisticated and advanced to just cultivate more, extract more. So I realized the power that we already had in our natural cycle and nature. So this picture of bee is a simple example of amazing power that we have through pollination, how to create abundance through these things that happen all the time. So now back to this, like when we open up the perspective and change the way we see the world, we start to see different things, even when we are surrounded by different sets of facts and statistics. So first of all, let me just show you a few different numbers. So first of all, in our world, as global priorities, let's say if we create additional $22 billion to go to help children who currently don't have access to education to have education, then we actually can enable those children to go to school. and in terms of additional funding that's required. And $23 billion is the additional funding required each year to give access to water to children. And $30 billion is the additional funding required to give access to nutrition to malnourished children. So those numbers are still big numbers and very overwhelming too. But when we look at the global industries, the power of businesses next to it, we now start to see different pictures. So first of all, $168 billion is the size of publishing industry in the world. And the pharmaceutical industry is even bigger, $1 trillion industry. And the fast food industry is also almost equally as powerful. And if we think about all other industries in the world, like, because fast food is not the entire food industry, there are so many others. And then also we have other hospitality businesses, other businesses that are doing technology. And so if we think about all the businesses out there and what they are doing already every day, we know that businesses actually do have the power to solve some of the biggest problems. So we are not lacking the power to solve problems today. What we may be lacking is this meaningful connection between our power to make a difference and then the opportunities, tangible opportunities to make the difference happen in a way that actually create the sustainability and the sustainable abundance. For me, one of the connections I experienced in my life that actually impacted me a lot, and that this is about the story as well, right? Like a power of story and the power of small. So I had this deep sense of connection that I experienced and really changed my life when I became a mom for the first time. So even though when I was younger, I wanted to make sense of things and I tried to challenge the status quo, but I still didn't know what to do. So I kept traveling, I kept working and moving to different parts of the world after living in the countryside in Japan. But one day when I became a mom for the first time and I realized that I felt this like extreme deep sense of love with my own daughter. But at the same time, I thought about all the other children I met at that time. And then I thought, like, I used to think that I was too small to do anything. I couldn't change the world and I couldn't solve the problems in the world. So I kind of let go and then kept living my own life. But when I had my own child, that was the time I really reflected on what this was all about, because I thought, I could say I was too small to do anything. But what if my daughter happened to be born in different circumstances? And then everybody in the world said, sorry, we are too small to do anything. Then what would we do? What happened to her? And I felt that I had to do something at that time. And instead of just being able to take care of my own family and my own children, I wanted to do something that also helped someone else and other children as well, even if I couldn't help everybody or change the world. So that became my entrepreneurship journey. And in the beginning, we didn't have a lot of money. So with almost nothing, like $1,000, I think $2,000, we bought this tiny takeaway food bar in New Zealand at that time. I was living in Christchurch then. And then we started our first business, and my daughter lived and existed on my back at that time. So when she was 3 months old, that's what we did. And after following years, then the business started to develop, and then eventually we sold, 2 businesses in New Zealand and moved to Australia to start a healthy food business. And eventually that turned into a frozen packaged meal business, which did gluten-free, allergy-free meals with organic ingredients, trying to provide healthy eating options to busy families. So that's when I realized something one day, because our business was starting to grow, like out of all the hardship and difficulties and hard work, and I was working so hard, and but I realized we weren't doing it really anything. Even though business it existed to try to do good and help our customers have a good meal, eating experience. But I thought like, we were saying to ourselves, like I was saying to myself that we weren't ready yet because, to do something because we didn't have a lot of profit. We are putting all the money back into business to, have a freezer room, new packaging, and we kept going like that. So I thought if we kept telling ourselves we weren't ready, then maybe in 10, 20 years time, we would still be in the same situation with a little bigger business and still saying to ourselves, we're not ready yet to do anything to give back or make a difference. So that was the moment I really reflected on that. And then I realized, and I thought about this, I thought, what if, instead of trying to do something big, we decided to do something small instead. And I realized that if we could just allocate a small portion of the proceed from every meal, then that will be sufficient for us to help provide a meal to a child. So, through experienced organization that dedicated themselves to enable these activities to happen. So anyway, the idea of B1G1, B1G1 came up at that time. And then we decided to implement that in our own company. And I realized how transformative it was because it was no longer about us just saying like we want to do good one day when we become successful. The act of caring and kindness became part of our everyday business. And the people in our business, like team members packing the food or customers enjoying the meal, we could all be part of this story of giving and story of caring and sharing the joy of giving. So that led me it took me about 7 months though to have another moment of realization, which was that what if it wasn't just us, because we could do this by ourselves, but what if every business in the world came together to practice this and did it in different ways? So just imagine, if every time you have a cup of coffee, a child receives access to life-saving water, or every time you purchase something that you enjoy online, and then a child receives access to education, or every time your accountant does tax filing, family somewhere receives access to income-generating resources. So imagine if every business around the world found a way to make a difference in the way that they care about. And businesses have so many, different variety, background, and business owners and people working in businesses care about different things. So naturally, when we collect all these different businesses together and help them be aligned to make a difference, then we actually can cover so many different issues in the world and create this ecosystem. So B1G1, today work on enabling businesses to do just that, and this is our website. So in B1G1 initiative, we focus on 3 important things. First of all, through this initiative, we enable every giving to have a tangible impact. Then just to give you a link to this, so back then, actually, that was 2007, we sold our business in Australia and then moved to Singapore to start B1G1 as a global giving initiative. And that's what we've been doing for 15 years. So to form this initiative and to really identify how to help businesses to implement this in their own company, we had to go through all sorts of things. But today, B1G1 initiative and our giving platform stands to make these 3 things happen. And the first thing is impact. So every giving that businesses do around the world will result in tangible and meaningful and measurable impact in the world, such as giving access to water to someone for a day, or educating a child for a day, or planting 1 tree, or giving a brick, or and the next part is actually habit, because by changing our habit and behavior on the day-to-day basis, rather than trying to do big thing one day, we create more integrity in our action but also we create these habitual actions that make a bigger difference. So it's all about embedding giving in what we do. And then the third part is connection. Even though we cannot change our world alone, when businesses come together, we can actually solve so many issues in the world. We have the power to make a real difference. Now, so the question is how we do that, right? Like, because we get asked all the time, and then maybe our website doesn't explain it that well yet. So I need to kind of sometimes explain this, and the best way to do it is to show you how it works. So let me just give you a super quick example of B1G1, how businesses actually use this, as a part of it, so you can actually get it. So first of all, this is the B1G1 dashboard. So imagine you are the business owner or team member implementing the giving in that business. So they log into B1G1 account and they see their impact dashboard. You can see the summary of the impacts created in the sustainable development goal, project updates, all the milestones of specific giving that you did. So you can find that there. Our project list, so this is where the giving begins, is like a search engine or shopping site. You go to Amazon to find the thing you want for yourself, but you come to B1G1 to find the things you want to give for the world. And you can use the search filter, you can find out more about the project, and then add to the cart just like shopping, or you can create this thing called giving stories. So giving stories are the embedding action. So every time something good happens in your business, you can make something great in the world, and you can say, oh, every time our client achieves milestone, we want to give this. And once you create the giving stories, of course, you can come back here and then you could add whatever the number of items that really happened to your giving cart. Or if you don't want to manually count them, you could automate this by integrating API or Zapier automation and integration with your giving stories. So every time something happens, like every time we have a Zoom call, then we can plant a tree and then thank the person for the meaningful conversations that you had. So that's kind of power of embedding, because then you don't need to remember to donate or give. You could just make your day-to-day actions matter more and create impact in the world. Now, once you start creating impact, you can also find these impact counters called B1G1 impact widget. And a widget could be like, for example, goal setting widget, and you can measure that. Or you could see the itemized impact, or you could see the sustainable development contributions you are making. And these widgets, and this is a map widget which shows the geographical spread of the impact you are creating. So these widgets can be all embedded on your website, just like embedding YouTube video. So anybody can do that today, to just to put that piece of embed code on the site, and then these counters will be tracking your live impact. So that's kind of like a quick how of how B1G1 works today. It took a really long time for us to figure this out. And then the part of how, it's not just about how the platform works, but how the actual initiative works, because then how is it possible? And as I said, it's all about impact, and also 100% of giving goes to the project. So anyway, so B1G1 have two sides, like different stakeholders. One side is the businesses that want to make a difference, and the other side are the social impact causes that are doing fantastic things, but they may not be totally always good at attracting contributions on the regular basis to make the impact activities happen all the time, and then to make it really efficient, right? Like fundraising is a constant issue for all of the causes in the world as well. So how do we actually link these things? And so let's just imagine. So these organizations, that we bring in, and they of course have to meet specific criteria. So we have a quite a strict criteria to assess, the global project activities and the causes. But let's say in B1G1, you can find a project like just 1 cent can give access to water for a day. So how is it possible? So first of all, the key to make this model work is that we have to make sure that we apply those criteria, and then also to make sure we understand their project track record and financial performance and statistics. So once we actually collect all this and approve that organization and their project, we can take a big project activity like building a well, and that could cost like thousands of dollars, $5,000–6,000 to build a well, and one company may not be able to give that entire amount. So we will take the statistics like how many people in the community that benefit from this well and how long the well would last. And we would do the breakdown together with the organization. Then we would come up with the tiny micro impact amount, and then we would list that as a project. And we will continue to do the annual review of the project ongoingly after that. So that's the work that we do with the coded side. And then business side is also similar, like because we do the breakdown, we ask businesses to think about the activities that they have. And so it could be a cafe saying that every time, we sell a cup of coffee, we are going to fund this, or, 5 days or 1 week worth of access to water, or every time they use 100 paper cups, then they want to plant a tree, or every time they train a new team member, then they want to fund the business training for a woman to run a business for a day. So this is about looking at the power of small and turning that into giving stories. So it's about the stories, it's about power of small. And in B1G1, today, we have more than 400 carefully selected high impact projects, and they are all categorized with the global goals. So that's why the statistics like the impact widget counters that is counting the impact that you and your business is creating. And so the power of small is transformed into power of stories, and the businesses around the world making a difference together. And another thing is that because 100% of giving goes to the project in B1G1, so we don't take any percentage, and it's totally free for the causes to join us as long as they can be approved. And so this entire initiative is actually funded by the subscription model by the businesses joining us and to access the platform, because today it's common to pay for the tools that businesses use. And as long as we make it really easy and simple for businesses will go, yeah, like, sure, we will use this tool. But then with that, we make sure that we have a sustainability around covering the entire cost of giving management and everything. So that's the B1G1 model. And today, we work with about 3,000 businesses around the world, nearly 450 projects listed on our platform. And those businesses have together created nearly 300 million giving impact to date. So we are approaching 15th anniversary this year, and hopefully we will be crossing the 300 million giving impacts together quite soon. And this is really about bringing these businesses, and many businesses we work with are SMEs, small businesses, and they could feel powerless in this big world, but we will bring them aligned with the global goals that we are working toward. And that's the basis of this idea. And as we wrap up, as I wrap up, my part of the story, I just want to share with you this quick video that show you the power of the business community. So enjoy.
Hello. At Slumbersack here in Germany, for every baby sleeping bag we sell to our customers around the world, we give to support the health and education of children in need.
Hi everybody, we're Ellis Knight International Recruitment in the UK, and for every placement and interview that we conduct, we give access to life-saving resources to people in need around the world.
Here at Green Super Camp Australia, we're really aware of the impact our young leaders will make in the future. And that's why we involve all the young people who come to camp in selecting B1G1 projects that they want to make a difference in the world.
At Beyond Impact, we make a difference with B1G1 in every event, every coaching call we facilitate, and every speech that we give. And one of our B1G1 goals is to rescue 1,000 kids from sex trafficking.
Hello from Oak Aquatic Swim School, Miami, Florida in the USA. We teach families to be safer around the water, and for every swimming lesson we teach, we give impacts to B1G1, and we're so grateful to have B1G1 in our lives.
So yeah, so this is the B1G1 community, and I actually see this as, just like this picture of tiny bees pollinating flowers in the world, because the businesses around the world and their tiny day-to-day actions are just like the pollinations that happen in nature, just by those pollinators doing what they do all the time, and that's ingrained in their DNA, and that's natural part of how they create abundance year after year. So businesses also have the same power, that by doing what we do, we could actually pollinate our flowers in the world and create the abundance collectively. But over the years, businesses only started to focus on maximizing profit, and as a result of it, we started to face the sustainability issues. So it's just about the time that we remember of the power that we have, and then the importance of nourishing our soil together. Back to this beautiful picture of our world and the little tiny dot that we are. We still have a tiny little dot, but imagine if every day through what we do in business, we inspired more people to realize the power that they have to make a difference and to come aligned. We don't need to judge each other. We don't need to fight over what's right and wrong, or which approach is better or not. Because that uniqueness that we embrace, the things that we notice and see, our own stories, and the things that we want to do to give back and make a difference, all those things can come together. And when we do so, we really do have the power to make a real difference. And back to the pictures of these big problems we see in the world, when we have the new eyes, and when we start to see these things with that brand new eyes, by shifting our perspective, we also now see opportunities that we have every day to transform these problems into an opportunity for us to make a difference. And together, businesses around the world, people working in those businesses, customers connecting with those businesses, and the people around the world whose lives can be empowered and transformed together. We are all part of this beautiful world together. So what if every day you could make a real impact just by doing what you do every day? And I just want to wrap this up and thank you for the amazing opportunity that you've given us, Ingrid and Matthew. So this is back to you.
Thank you so much, Masami. I'm going to get us back to gallery view as we have lots of questions. We've had a very active chat, so there's a whole bunch of wonderful questions from our audience who are watching from all over. And wow, I'm just, my heart is overflowing with your presentation. Absolutely beautiful, and thank you so much. And I just want to read some of the beautiful comments that we've gotten. So we've got, amazing to take such a brave shift in self-sufficiency, and love her realization after 2 years. That was when you were talking about your experience going out to the farm and then realizing that it wasn't effective to judge people in the cities. And international connection is such a critical arm to make this bigger impact. And the act of caring became part of our everyday business. Oh my God, my heart is overflowing. And see here, love the idea of creating a giving story. And oh my God, hashtag power of small. I'm so inspired and excited to hear responses to my questions above, which we'll get to in just a moment. And fantastic. I've really enjoyed giving through my coaching business for the last few months. So we've got some B1G1 fans already in the house.
Hello.
So yeah, those are just some of the beautiful, inspiring comments. And with that, I guess I would love to start with a question from Mariette Martinez. She asked, how do we get humans to care enough about other humans to implement an act of caring in their business? Isn't this built on character in a person, or can this be learned or inspired by another? Or said more simply, if a business owner is not nourishing their own soul, how do we get them to care about other people?
Good question. I actually think that we all inherently have this desire to care and desire to be cared, right? Like, and the fact is, like, what I learned is, when I was backpacking, it was pretty fascinating because in that time I was traveling around the world. At some time I lived in more well-to-do nations like Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and Japan. And in those countries, right, like even when people had a lot for themselves, I often saw people who are not happy with what they had, or they felt still insecure, even though they had quite a lot. But then when I went to countries where people had far less, and I still found the people who seems to be very happy and very generous. They didn't have a lot, but they invited me to eat with them. And then I used to think like, well, but oh my gosh, you don't have a lot of food, and you don't even have a table or a bed, or you're sleeping on the floor. And why are you giving me the food that you have? Because you don't know if you can feed your children next week. And so, but then what I realized was that people who are actually happier, seemingly happier, were the people who are generous, who are caring, who are giving, and who are sharing. And then the people who had a lot, but then feeling insecure, not happy, no matter how much more they had. So if we think about the real secret of what makes people become more fulfilled, that part of fulfillment is that feeling of that no matter how much or how little you have the ability to still give and to serve, to care for others. And so even though, we might come across some people who seems to be like uptight and holding on and trying to get more, or but we don't need to judge, because we are all going through this journey and story. We are going through different experiences, the different circumstances. So we never can fully understand what people are going through in their life, the pain and the suffering and the challenges and the fear. And so if we just to be the, we just to focus on the potential of human goodness, and then to actually focus on what we can do today and touch people, to appreciate everybody, then we can start unlocking the inherent ability to care in others as well. And then to remember that it's not like good and bad, good people and bad people. It's not that. People who may have a certain pain in the past or trauma, or, all those things to contribute toward our behavior today or reaction today. But if we are here to unlock the power of humanity, then we can stand for what we can do and to be kind and supportive, appreciative, and to see the goodness in others. And that's how I think we can unlock more kindness in the world, because today the world became so, quite divided, and this side and that side argument, and maybe both sides have a point, but we can't come together because we judge. But what if we just let go of the differences aside, or even appreciate the differences, and come together to listen, to try to understand, to be curious, to appreciate that ability for us to see things differently. I think if we can all do that, little bit more of that in the world, there is so much good that we can do together, because we actually do have the ability to do good in the world.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Masami. I actually have another question from Mariette as a follow-up. How do we get business owners to trust B1G1 if they have resistance to donating or using online platforms such as this?
Sometimes like we hear, certain news and then realize, oh, actually like, charity giving may not be so effective, or so there's a lot of information as well, right? Like mistrust. And in general, like today's world has a lot of mistrust, because in the online activities too, we hear a certain type of fraud, or so it's easy to get tied up with that too. And then I don't think it's about trying to convince people, because the more we try to convince each other, then it might become harder to convince, right? So I think the important thing is that we continuously reflect on the good that we can do, and then how to improve our own conduct. So B1G1 has created over the years the model that tried to create that total transparency as well. And then so today we have a model of a social enterprise working on the business membership initiative and focus on providing great value to business. And at the same time, when the giving happens, then we basically pass on 100% of that funding to the causes, and we are audited, and we have a separate governance under the nonprofit, and to apply that criteria, overcoming any form of conflict of interest. And so the model itself already like explain, okay, here is this like accountability, and it's all transparent. And then of course it's never perfect, right? It's never 100% perfect, but it's about working toward the betterment of the world, creating the structure where the maximum good can happen. So in a sense, like we don't kind of try to like convince people. We just focus on doing the good in the way that we know, and we can continue to improve by receiving feedback from others and learning through experiences. So yeah, if anybody has a question, then you can always reach out to the B1G1 team, and we address all of the questions along the way. But also, if you are a business owner and you want to do this, then actually the first step is that you do it by yourself, rather than convincing the others, right? Because when we stand with our own belief and we take the action, turn our desire to do good into actions, and we do it every day, then one day you will inspire more people, because you are ingraining that integrity into your action, right? Like, so I think working with more business owners who genuinely believe in the power of business, so that the giving resonate with people around the world.
Thank you, Masami. Now, Ingrid, I know we have a couple more questions, but I wanted to just highlight something. One other way to help people build trust is to see examples, right? And actually, I just found an article on your blog about accountants that are using B1G1. So it was perfectly written. We have
so many accountants in B1G1, interestingly, because initially it was because we had more relationships with accountants when we started this initiative. But it's also because businesses like accountants are really important catalyst in the world, because they are connecting and working with businesses, right? Like they themselves are the change maker in some way, because they can influence what their clients potentially do, like if they are actually working together, like rather than just doing tax filing and that's it, like that service provider situation. So actually accountants could be a great advisors to those businesses, right? So when accountants said, oh, we are doing this, then of course that message could actually touch and inspire others as well. So we love accountants, and how some accountants said, oh, we used to just think we were ordinary business, it's because it's boring business or something, like they thought. But many of the accountants that we work with, like they are just being proud to be the accountants, because they could make so much good in the world and also inspire their clients. So yeah, they are cool businesses.
Yes, they are. Well, and with that, I want to make sure that we get a nice little hat tip to Steve Pipe, who is a fantastic accounting professional from the UK, who really turned us on to B1G1. So he couldn't be here with us today. He's in the middle of moving houses, but he did send a question that he wanted us to ask you on his behalf. He says, you describe B1G1 as an operating system for good. Can you say more about that? Why is it that you describe B1G1 as an operating system for good?
Because initially B1G1 was pretty much more like a heart-centered aspirational initiative to inspire businesses to think about taking action, but we didn't have too much of the kind of mechanism. There are lots of things that happened manually, right, in the early days. But over the years, we started to transform the model into a platform-based model. And we realized that we need to make a difference, because it's so easy to say we want to do this good things, and good things are hard to achieve. Such as becoming fit or eating healthy, or the things that we know it's good for us and we want to achieve. But those are the things that is very difficult to actually do, right? In long term and sustain it, because it's about transforming the habit. So we realized that part of it is to help businesses really understand and realize the power they have. But another more important part of it is to give them the simple and easy mechanism to implement this and to embed this into action and then automate it. And so that's why today's B1G1 is actually focused on being the operating system for good for businesses. So just businesses, by doing what they normally do, they can create the good in the world. And especially during the pandemic, it mattered a lot because we started to make that transition to become digital business before, just before the pandemic. And if we are operating before, event, going to event after event and promoting B1G1, and then we would have had so much difficulty. But during the pandemic, interestingly, initially we saw a lot of drop in giving and membership too. But in the end of 2020, things started to come back up, and we were quite amazed how 2021 turned into the biggest giving year in history of B1G1. And even though we were still in the pandemic, and then the realization was that when we are working on building an ecosystem of these SMEs, rather than just focusing on a few large companies, CSR initiative or something, then there is this inherent strength because some businesses are doing better during pandemic, or they pivoted very quickly to new model, or so there is such a collective strength and power that this business community have. And we want every business to actually be able to implement this through the systematic perspective as well, but do it with the genuine right intention, to do the good in the world.
Beautiful. And do you have any advice for accounting professionals specifically on leveraging your operating system?
Yeah, sure. Because, for example, accountants are accountants, right? Good at numbers, good at accounting. So they probably love measuring things. So, for example, just like you saw that the B1G1 can incorporate it in the different tools. So, you can actually automate the tracking where it's 0 and then using Zapier, for example, and then link that. So every time invoice is paid, or when you send the invoice, it could be that, and then the invoice is paid on time. You could actually say, oh, thank you so much for, making the payment on time, because together we actually help to educate a child, So, and then B1G1, we always encourage more of this as a result giving rather than upfront, saying do this and then we will give this and then promote it upfront, because sometimes people might think oh, but that's a conditional, right? Are you saying that I have to buy this so that you will give that? And sometimes people might see it that way. But if it was as a result, something good happening in the business, and then we go, oh, thank you so much for this nice conversation on Zoom, or thank you for attending our event, or thank you for purchasing our book, downloading this guide, or and as a result, we made this impact happen. And so that message generally like resonate more, just so you know. And accountants like probably can think of so many ways that this amazing impact can be linked to all sort of business performance KPI, or to empower and inspire people, or if they are bouncing ideas with the clients. Those are the things that accountants may be able to advise, like, oh, what about? So I'm sure accountants can do so much good, and I would love to hear from people, business owners, accountants, their ideas about how to incorporate this act of effective giving in business in ever more meaningful ways.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Masami. Now, I actually have a question that is sort of a follow-up, and Ingrid, I want to make sure I didn't miss any questions in the chat before I ask my question.
I think we got all the ones in the chat so far.
Okay, great, awesome. So, I posted another article, and this might be a big question that, for purposes of time, might require a short answer for now, and then we can do some follow-up later. But I dropped another link in the chat, where another link to your blog, and I love this link because it's a direct correlation to a Lyceum we recently did on ESG, but in fact you called it, or your blog refers to it as embedding or embed social good, so you're changing the acronym. I love that. And what it brings forward for me is this question of, as you were building this business and reflecting on ESG and or other sort of tools or systems or practices like a CSR, corporate social responsibility, I'm curious how you see this tool or this platform or this operating system as distinct from some of the other ways that people are giving in the world, and why you feel like this might be perhaps a more accessible version for small business owners. Because I noticed, for example, there's a level at which solopreneurs can actually enter into this, which I think is really valuable, because CSR programs seem very elusive and big to us small business. So I just would love to hear your thoughts on how this fits into that ecosystem of giving mechanisms and giving approaches.
Yeah, I totally agree with you about the CSR approach and how that could be like alienating for small businesses. And the naming itself, right? Like already corporate social responsibility, then that seems like just for big businesses. So for us, like it's really so even more important to inspire small businesses, because big companies can do what they do. They can have a CSR department, they can pay consultants to do this, and they have a probably large budget to do something about CSR. But small businesses want to do something, from just the strategic part of view. Like small businesses probably make decisions because owners believe in something, or people in the company have this certain sense of mission, or so. I think the small business, where they come from, have a potentially so much more genuine stance on the social impact. So for us, like enabling that, but systematically, so that it can scale, and we can also bring the cost down for small businesses to get started, is important. And also, if the giving, impact can start from just 1 cent, and then you can link the impact with just one thing that happened in your business, and then that becomes 2, and then 3, and the 10, and the 100, and 1,000. So the giving in this way can become part of your own journey, because when you are doing well, you can of course give more, but when your business is having a little bit of a quiet period, then you will be giving less, and then there's no like upfront commitment, like you have to give this much so that you can mention you are giving, or you need to sign up a contract with a charity, or so. Actually, the conventional model makes it's very difficult for anybody to do anything or small businesses to do something. But for us, the focus of enabling the power of small is important. And even like when we work with larger companies these days, we still focus on power of small, because larger companies have a small people inside the organization, and these individuals might feel a little bit like powerless in the great scheme of things. Like they go like, oh well, our company is doing CSR, but I don't feel like connected with that at all, because, you know, it's about the company kind of presenting a check on stage or giving a big amount of money to a chosen charity. But in B1G1, so those companies that have a team members can actually invite the team members and they issue impact token, a thing called impact token. And then, you know, when the team receive a token of impact, then they can go to B1G1 and choose to allocate the token to different impacts that they want to create. And then that counts toward the collective goal of the company. So in a sense, like regardless of the size of company or type of business, this is really about connecting the power of small and ability of every human being to actually become aligned, you know, and they choose to do what they care about.
I love that. Thank you. I love that the power of story and the power of small. And I know we're running out of time. I do have one more question. This was kind of my juicy question for you. And once again, just like Matthew was saying, like, it's a juicy question that, you know, is going to need a concise answer due to time. Getting back to your rooting in story, which is so powerful. Recognizing that money is a story, money is a narrative, that it's something that human beings made up. What is your impression or experience of our global culture's money story and financial narrative? And how would you rewrite that story to be more regenerative?
So again, you know, money existed as a mean to exchange our resources, our ability, you know, and then it was an easy way to store that value in a small size coin or paper or something, and it became digital now. So it's actually just that, you know, how to transfer the value from one to the other. That's what it is. And then what happened was we started to create this like accumulative mentality around the money. So the more we pool and the more we acquire and then store and then, you know, grow what we have and then hold on to that. And then, you know, one day you might actually leave that as inheritance to your own children. So then your family kind of offspring will become more wealthy after generation after generation. And then, you know, and then it's created such a huge divided world as well in terms of income inequality of the world. But the thing is, the power of money and the power of story is not in hoarding. And the power of money and the power of story is in sharing. And then the more we can share and the more we can let that flow, that creates actually more abundance for all, including for ourselves. You know, because imagine like you're holding and you're wealthy, but you can't trust anybody. And you still feel insecure that you have to have more compared to you are actually being generous and kind and then adding the value, providing the value to others. Your lifetime is going to be much more meaningful and wealthy and enriched by that action. So, and your descendant will probably remember you for the good that you did than the money you left. Because if you just left, you know, lots of money, your children and grandchildren might fight with each other to see who gets more, right? Like, so you might end up creating this kind of thing. But what if your responsibility as a parent and grandparents is to empower and enable your offspring and descendants to be the good contributors to the world in their own ability, rather than because you leave something, you know, passively to them. So I think that, you know, there's so much power in the money and the story, but we just have to kind of remember that joy of giving, joy of sharing, because then, you know, actually we will become wealthier altogether in the long run.
I love that. The power is not in holding, but in sharing. And that actually is a fantastic segue as we wrap up into just a couple quick announcements, because our next Lyceum here with the Accounting Alchemy Network is talking with Clayton Oates on how to create an infinite game mindset. And I feel like you just wove that together so nicely, Masami, of, you know, breaking out of that zero-sum game, that idea that in order to win, somebody else has to lose, and that there's only so much to go around, that the more we're able to give, the more we all have. And that's just so beautiful. So Matthew, would you like to wrap us up with just a couple announcements, letting us know what's coming next?
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned the first one. We have our next Lyceum on Thursday, July 21st at 3 p.m. Pacific. That's 6 p.m. Eastern with Clayton Oates on developing an infinite mindset. We also have a social forum coming up on Wednesday, July 27th at 1 p.m. Pacific. That's 4 p.m. Eastern. If you're curious what that experience is like, you can actually, if you're on our newsletter, you've got a replay. You can find the replay in one of the social media groups. It's a great opportunity to connect with the community and share some of your thoughts and ideas about what's coming up for you as you engage in the content of this webinar or any of the Lyceums to date. Of course, we also are continuing our book club with Charles Eisenstein's Sacred Economics. That book club goes through July into August, so you can jump in anytime. It's a read what you can, come when you can experience. So please don't feel overwhelmed or concerned that you didn't finish the reading. You're welcome to be in the space. And of course, lastly, scroll through our LinkedIn and our Facebook group. We've been posting content now for many months, in addition to our Lyceums and now this webinar. There's some great stuff there that will help to guide you and your colleagues as accounting professionals in really doing good for the world. So please look at that content, engage in that content, and share it with other people so that they understand the work that we're doing here at the Accounting Alchemy Network. Over to you, Ingrid.
Fantastic. Well, I just want to wrap up by thanking Masami so much again for joining us today, and for all of everyone who's watching this on Facebook or LinkedIn or on YouTube. Please check out B1G1. Masami gave us a really great overview on how we can easily take action. And thank you so much, Masami, to make helping in this world so much easier and showing how the power of small can make a big impact, and how none of us are doing this alone, and that together we're making a huge difference. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. Have a great day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.